My name is David Hester, and this is my colleague.
I'm Jeremy Baker.
There you go, yeah. We're here today to talk about how automation is actually your friend and not a foe, and how embracing it can provide you with opportunities to improve your current network infrastructure and maybe even propel your career. Before I continue, there are just a couple of things I want to make clear, though. This presentation and the examples of coding and automation that Jeremy is going to present to you and show you and even share with you are all presume our LANrev infrastructure. So it may be possible for you, and it should be, given some of the high-level points that I'll be making in the presentation, it should be possible for you to take it, brainstorm what you've seen here, and go to your own environments. But LANrev is what we assume here, so if you're not running LANrev, you have 30 seconds to leave the room. Otherwise, we'll just move forward now. And that's actually kind of funny because we assumed there were maybe 4 of us LANrev users here, given all the jams and monkey.
Humbled that everybody came out.
Yeah, it's really quite cool. Thank you for coming. The other thing I just need to say real quick is we work at a federal agency who shall remain nameless. But what we've done here is real-world implementations that we've designed on behalf of our clients. And more interestingly, to me anyway, the topics that we're going to discuss are topics that all of our customers are facing, whether now or shortly. So we've had to spend a good deal of our time thinking about what we're going to be doing on behalf of them. But the only reason we could do that thinking is as a result of the automations that we've implemented. So these are real-world implementations and examples for you. Anyway, let's begin. Tell me if this reminds you of anything. Speaking into the mouse. The fact of the matter is a great deal of our time on our jobs is spent in reactive mode, isn't it? We work hard addressing our customers' needs and fixing their immediate issues. But the result really is we never have a moment to think and plan and develop efficiencies to improve our end user experiences. In all honesty, if we were going to help our clients while at the same time ensuring our relevance as IT professionals, we have to find a way to tame the beast. One of the first things and most obvious things that we could take a look at, and a closer look at, is our management systems, and begin to ask some very pointed questions about whether and to what degree these systems provide you with what you need. Depending on how you define these systems, management systems may or may not include imaging and deployment tools, or license management tools, or configuration management tools. And yet, all of these should be considered basics of what our jobs encompass and should be considered fundamental services to be offered by our systems. So if they don't have them, you need to supplement your systems with this. Monitoring is another responsibility. How well do our systems provide insight into successful deployment, configuration, and ongoing communication? It kind of seems ridiculous to me, but some of our best vendors don't seem to appreciate the value of providing simple, easy means by which to generate automated reports and notifications on things like licensing or on compliance or basic status questions. Asset management. This is not just a property issue. Many environments have no idea what the relationship is between equipment purchased and equipment managed. Finally, how do we ensure people's information won't be compromised without us getting in their way? See, to me, all of these areas typically represent areas of responsibility that our end users, and therefore our bosses, assume we are supposed to take care of. And to that degree, it is what our management systems ought to be able to provide us. Well, how do we do that? Do they provide it to us? And if they don't, we need to do something about it to make it easier for us to improve our end users' experiences and give ourselves a break from the monotony of playing whack-a-mole. So even if they do provide these services to some degree, we we probably should spend a little more effort and energy on automating them in order to ensure a more consistent service. So how do we do that? Well, automation, right? And here are the areas that we see are areas of improvement. Low-hanging fruit. Imaging, just for faster provisioning. Automated enrollment into our systems. File Vault 2 encryption, because our requirement is that no device leave our hands without it first being encrypted. Third-party management software, of course. So our security officers can sleep well at night knowing Flash and Java zero-day exploits are being addressed. Of course, broken agents are the Achilles heel of every management system. Can we do some self-healing? Asset insight, so our property doesn't just wander away. And finally, deep monitoring, looking into potentially new approaches to protect against malware rather than the reactive approach, maybe proactive approaches. So these are the areas of automation. But before I hand this over to Jeremy to demonstrate about it, the point of the presentation is not just to give you these tools and to share them with you, but to get you to think about the impact that automation can have upon your job. One way is to look at automation as a threat. And that may be your immediate reaction and quite possibly a true situation that you face. But even if that's true, automation also offers you a chance to think beyond the short-term focus of your particular job and to ponder potential opportunities for your career. Are you where you ultimately want to be? I mean, the technology field is notorious for unimaginable future change. And it's often the case that job experience and life experience will not protect you in the long run. So just to drive the point home before I hand it over to Jeremy, do you actually have time to work beyond the break-fix paradigm? Do you have time to begin to think strategically, develop technology roadmaps, and get out of O&M into R&D? Or maybe more personally, Ed from Google, he gave a presentation on systems administration and its history and how the responsibilities of systems administrator have changed over time. Is system administration all you want to do? And does system administration actually only entail the administration of systems? So the two goals for today's presentation is to get you thinking about these things while Jeremy presents you a way to automate yourself out of your jobs and into something better. So Jeremy?
Thanks. All right. So this is my super cool avatar that David's daughter drew. Admire it. We're not going to be doing too much of a deep dive into any code. I'm going to be demoing it / showing you some videos. Unfortunately, the network couldn't handle all the demos we wanted to do, so they're videoed. But if you do want to look at any of the code beforehand or while we're going through it, anything, it is on my GitHub here. I apologize, I didn't upload the keynote to that, but I can do that afterwards. So you don't feel, if you want to take notes, you can, but don't feel like you have to, because I'll put the PDF up after this. So David already mentioned these topics. These are what we're going to focus on for two reasons. These are what we feel we can brag about. These are what we feel we pretty well automated in our environment, so we want to kind of just show that off. But also because these are big topics that affect your customers and your techs. So if you're not the person who's really interacting with customers on a regular basis, or you're not the one who's doing the imaging and the enrollment and the encryption, and a tech is, and you haven't automated these, then the chances are they're not very happy, because these become very tedious tasks that they have to do over and over and over again. So we wanted to really point these out because we feel like these are the ones that make the biggest difference in other people's work, basically. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So imaging, our imaging infrastructure is a combination of Apple tools and custom-built tools. We use an Apple Net Installer, which is built with System Image Utility, and it just installs a post-install package, or runs a post-install package, rather. In that post-install package, it mounts this DMG, and we'll go over this a little bit later. And in the DMG is this light touch folder, which is just kind of a miscellaneous collection of tools, and this onset application. The onset application allows our techs to interact during the imaging process. So all of our machines are decaled. They get deployed to different locations, and based on those locations, different admin accounts are created. We need a way to enter that information pretty easily for the technician who's doing the imaging, and the onset app gives us that way. And again, I'll go over this, so don't feel too confused. So before I show you the video, I wanted to go into a little bit of kind of a workflow diagram architecture. So we have our pretty client here, pretty rose gold MacBook. So it's brand new, the technician gets it, and the first thing they're going to do is they're going to boot into the net install environment. So that's our netboot server hosting this net install OS image. Also on the netboot server is the light touch DMG that I mentioned, and once the OS is deployed, that post-install package will mount this DMG. Use the laser pointer here. Within the DMG is the onset.app and this light touch folder. Within the light touch folder is a few different miscellaneous things. This contains our admin users with their hashes, a light touch package which puts the LANrev installer agent on the system, and some launch daemons, etc. So the post-install package runs. It runs this onset.app, and once the tech enters the information, the light touch package and a few other files are put onto the actual client machine file system at that point. And the machine reboots. So let's go ahead and watch that. This is obviously sped up for demo purposes, so unfortunately it doesn't take a minute, but. Yeah. This is a new SSD Apple hasn't released yet. We'll go over a little bit of the kind of enrollment and that in a second, but we use the net installer one because we can customize it like this. Just real quick, I'll answer that in just a second. So this is the onset application that the techs interact with. Let me see if I can pause it just for a second. So you can see, like I said, we have decals that allows the techs to put in the 8-digit number. This is used in the naming convention, the location, the lab that it's going to. Again, that all helps determine the admin users. That'll be on the machine, and then they just click reboot. So we're able to customize it. We specifically use our own image, which I know it's kind of, you're talking about LANrev's tool, imaging tool. Personally, I've never used it. I kind of inherited this infrastructure, so I'm not sure what the original motivation was, but I can say part of the reason we do the OS deployment, for a while we were doing very thin provisioning where we would just take a machine out of the box and start installing stuff, and we by the Google guys, we're kind of made aware that that's possibly a security risk. So working for the federal government, you might have a target on your back and you never know where that machine really came from. So we decided, well, we want to make sure we wipe this machine clean, always put a fresh OS on. And it just works better in our workflow to have this kind of app that the tech can interact with, basically. But I've never used the LANrev tool, so I can't speak to if it could really handle that or not. What's that? Well, there you go. So enrollment. So at this point, we've got the OS on the computer, the fresh OS on the computer, and those settings and the raw LANrev installer files. So then how do we get it into LANrev? So we have a few different pieces. We use Login Log, which was built by Per Olofsson. It's on GitHub. It's a really great tool, very simple. It just displays a log as it goes on the login window. We use AM Kickstart, which is a little bit dated at this point. But it's also written by Per Olofsson, and what that does is it kicks the agent into pulling all the packages. We found that after the agent was deployed and installed, it could take 15 to 20 minutes before it would really start ramping up the software installation. So this kind of expedited that for us. We wanted our techs to just be able to get it done quickly. Onset.py is what does very much of the heavy lifting for us. So this creates our users on the system. It enables SSH for us. It actually installs the LANrev agent. It runs the AM Kickstart, and then we get a really nice email at the end of that as well. And I'll show you that. So back to our workflow. Our machine is rebooted, and at this point, again, the tech has only had to boot into the netboot server and enter 3 pieces of information. The machine turns back on. Via launch daemon, the onset.py script is going to run, and then basically everything else is going to happen. The user's created, LANrev agent installed, and the heartbeat kicks off. Client reaches out to our LANrev server. The LANrev server responds with just about everything else we need to configure the machine. So all of our profiles, packages, we write a lot of scripts for settings, so time zone scripts and all that kind of stuff. That's all done via the LANrev server, which allows us to be a little bit modular. If we need to change any of that, we just need to change one package or whatever package. So let's go ahead and take a look. Also sped up. You can see our users are already created before login log even launches. That's just how quickly the launch daemon has kicked off the onset script. So at this point, SSH is enabled, the admins are there. It's installing the LANrev agent at this point. Again, it's a little outdated. It says absolute manage. Reaches out to the server, tries to make sure it can establish a connection. It gets the response, and you'll see here all the packages and everything start coming down. So this is a lot of garbly-gook that really we don't really care what this says. The reason we enable the debug mode and show this is really just to show our techs that something is still happening. Don't touch it yet. Don't reboot it yet. It's still pulling stuff. So we just wanted it to spit out a ton of stuff rather than just sit idle and just say, install package, install package. You know, we wanted it to just constantly show something that, okay, it is doing work. The machine automatically reboots, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. And then we come back to a fully imaged machine. At this point, you're ready to go. You're ready to hand it off to a customer. We've got our profiles installed, this nice banner, all that good stuff. And here we go. We've got a happy MacBook. From an admin perspective, we get this pretty email, and it says, this computer just finished imaging. If you've ever used Deploy Studio, they kind of have a similar functionality, which I took inspiration from. But one of the big things that this gives us, and David kind of pointed out, is the file vault status. We needed a way to ensure file vault was done before ever leaving the tech's hands at the time of imaging. And with this email, we can see that and therefore stop it if it ever fails or anything. We can basically call that tech real quick and say, hey, wait a minute, something didn't work right. Don't go giving it out just yet. I like email. You'll see that over this course. So I get a lot of these reports of different types. So we've shown you this, and you might be thinking, hey, that's pretty cool. How do I set that up in my environment? The code is there. Feel free to look at it, tailor it. But we think there are some better options out there. If you've ever heard of Imager, built by Graham Gilbert, same guy who built Crypt, a few other tools. This is a really cool tool, kind of the stepchild of Deploy Studio, like I've already mentioned. And you guys might be using these. The reason we brought these up is because our tool was built very much for our environment. It hasn't really been tailored to be more distributable to the general public. As I said, the code's there, but it's just not ready to be like, you know, Graham built it with put it on a web server, run it. Ours is like taking all these different pieces. You can see the workflow gets a little funky. So we just thought, you know, maybe not the best to say, go use our tool, because there might be some easier things that aren't as difficult to set up. So encryption. You saw in the image, the second video, the machine automatically reboots. Our current encryption setup is using a custom package that enables file vault with the auth restart flag. You can use that while enabling, which is nice. And we feed it a plist with our admin users and an institutional recovery key. And you might be thinking, well, that seems weird. Why do that? There's a few advantages for us. It allows us to enable multiple admins at the time of enablement. So, sounds repetitive, but we have these different labs, and we have a few different admins per lab. And so we need to make sure all of them are on the system, ready to go, again, at the time of handing it over. That basically just alleviates an extra step for a tech, right? So that's just kind of an automated thing. And then it ensures file vault is enabled at the time of imaging. So rather than using a profile, which we are looking into, and I think we've got almost set up, but the default profile usage is kind of the defer flag where you hand it to a customer, and then when they log in or out, they get to enable it. That doesn't really work for us because it has to be enabled already. So this just ensures it's done automatically and the tech doesn't have to do anything to get it going. There are some disadvantages. It doesn't allow for key escrowing. So this is why we're looking into the profile solution to see if we can maybe migrate this over and pull that personal recovery key. And then the one step that the tech does need to remember is to enable the customer. So if we hand this over and we don't enable them, they reboot, they're kind of stuck. But in our environment, it's a little bit more important to have it done already. So we feel that this disadvantage for us doesn't outweigh the advantages. It may for you, it just works for us. I didn't say this, but I did mean to at the beginning. We're certainly not up here to say, use our tools, we know what we're doing the best, just to show you how we've tried to think outside the box with our automation. So I hope you don't feel like I'm like, you got to be doing it our way. So third-party software management. David mentioned this one already about security officers. This is another one for me that I see from the tech and user perspective is very important. Because again, if you're not automating this, you probably have some frustrated people. If you have users who don't have admin rights, or even if they do, and they're being constantly prompted to update 50 applications, they're going to get a little frustrated. And if you say, well, I'll patch it eventually, they're going to be like, well, that's not really good enough. So this is something that we really strive to get right and do well. We use a few combinations of tools I'm sure most of you are pretty familiar with. We use AutoPackage, AutoPackager, might be AutoPKG, I'm not sure, and LANrev importer. So these are really great tools. We'll show you just how easy it is to set these up. But you might say, well, why not use LANrev's third-party patch management? And I have no reason to say don't use it, but we again found some advantages versus disadvantages. So advantages for us, or sorry, for using LANrevs are that it's built into the console, right? So if you're used to using LANrev, this might be easier for you, and you might say, oh, it's already done, LANrev handles it, great. And that's a totally valid point. And it will only apply to computers that need the update. Thank you, Rob, for that information a few weeks ago. So this is like OS X patching in LANrev. It knows which clients have Google Chrome, and therefore which clients need the updated Google Chrome. AutoPackager doesn't do that unless you use some smart groups, etc. But there are disadvantages. It's limited to software available from Lumention. That's the catalog they pull from. We have some custom software, in-house built software that's just not available on Lumention. And the benefit of AutoPackage is that you can just write your own recipe for it. If anybody went to the recipe robot session, you may have seen that. And therefore, you can just start using it and automatically getting those updates. We found it doesn't always grab the Delta installers. It may have gotten better. We haven't used it for a while, but we found we don't want to be pushing out a gigabyte to every client when a new Adobe comes out. We want to make sure it's just the Delta, and AutoPackage allowed us to do that. It doesn't have the community that AutoPackage does. This is not a dig at LANrev in any way. Their support's very helpful. They're always very quick to respond. They're even on the Slack channel most of the days and willing to talk to you. But there aren't a few hundred, if not 1,000 of them around the world just about always willing to help you write a recipe or fix a recipe or troubleshoot what's going on. And I see that as a huge benefit because I have myself several times said, hey, I can't figure out what's going on here. And Greg Nagel will go, well, you just need to do this. And then it's not as customizable. So we're very into automation, right? We use a naming convention in our environment. We use certain installation conditions. We wanted all of that to be done at the time of import. You can go and you can rename LANrev's third-party patches, but you have to go rename it, right? This allows us just to do it automatically. So again, unfortunately, I wanted to demo this, but the speed of the network didn't allow me to. So I'm going to show you real quick how easy it is to get set up using AutoPackager and LANrev importer if you use LANrev. Again, this is also sped up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is grab AutoPackager. This is built by the guys at Lindy Group, the same people who did the recipe robot demo. It's a really, really great tool. I just clicked this fast. Yeah, man. So we're going to open up AutoPackager. First thing it notices is, hey, you don't have AutoPackage installed. So we're going to go ahead and get that installed. That's the kind of back end. And then the guys were so nice to include LANrev importer right into it. And it sees, hey, LANrev importer is not installed. So we can go ahead and download it. This is pulling directly from my GitHub. So every new release, it will automatically say, hey, there's a new version out. And LANrev importer is ready to go. So let me pause it just for a second. That's it. Besides choosing your recipes, that is literally how simple it is to use Auto Packager and LANrev Importer. It is 3 essential clicks. Download, checkbox, checkbox. That's it. But I did want to show you how the recipes work. So we're going to go to, hey, look at this guy. We're going to go to his GitHub, and we're going to see what recipes he has available. We're going to choose Acronis Access and OSQUERY, David's favorite tool. And all you have to do is click Run Recipes. It's automatically going to open up LANrev admin. You can see OSQUERY just appeared right there. Already saves it to the server. I'm sorry, it's going really fast. I sped it up a little too much. And then Acronis Access just got uploaded. It's all done. It's already saved. Thanks. You can, if you've never used Auto Packager, you can schedule that. You can run it every hour, every day, every week, whatever you'd like. You can set up notifications. So I get an email every time a new package is downloaded and uploaded. And besides the fact that you have to be logged into the machine, this can just sit on a server and you never have to touch it unless you want to change a recipe, change a whatever, notification. But you don't ever have to click that Run Recipes button. It will just do it. And so this is just another way to kind of alleviate yourself, right? I don't want to have to go look and see what the new Chrome is. Let Auto Package do it for you. So this is the only one I am going to live demo, LANrev Promoter. So one of the other benefits of automation that David didn't talk about is the fact that it removes human error, right? So if you automate everything, you don't have a risk of messing it up, assuming you built it correctly. And I found in my environment, I was forgetting to push packages to production. So we push out to test, and then we upgrade to production, and I was forgetting. So I'd be like, oh, don't worry, tell the customer it's coming in 3 days, we just gotta make sure it works. And then it'd be like 2 weeks. So I was like, how do we figure out a way to automatically promote it? This is definitely a proof of concept, but hopefully it can develop into something a little cooler. The goal is to provide the automated promotion tool. We realize this is a little bit of a dangerous precedent, right? You may have software that you don't want automatically pushed out to the production group if you use that kind of infrastructure. So it will allow you to define exemptions of software. You might say, I never want to promote this piece of software. And then it will only promote third-party software. It doesn't push Apple's updates out to clients. We just felt like those are a little bit more serious. You should probably be in charge of really when those go out. So let me show you. Oh, there it is. All right. Can everybody see that? It's a little small. I don't know if I can make it bigger or not. Well, all right. You'll have to deal. So we've got our terminal. Hopefully that'll make it a little more apparent. We've got our terminal. I've already downloaded LANrev Promoter. It is on my GitHub, and it's linked on that link I sent earlier. It's a pretty straightforward Python script, and all you have to do is drag it into your terminal and run it. It needs to be run as root. Oop, that's my password. Don't want to give it that. OK. So what it does, it says, this is the first time I'm being set up, basically. I need you to tell me what are my test groups and what are my production groups. LANrevs use a SQLite database, and so it's actually trying to link to this ID. So you have to give it the ID first. So for us, that's 7. And then it says, give me your production group. That's 6. And it says, hey, OK, we're good to go. I see your groups, and I see these 3 pieces of software that have this group assignment already. If I had hit yes, it would then go and it would promote them to the production group I defined, but I'm going to say no for a second. I'm going to go over to my LANrev server, and I'm going to say, well, Google Chrome is risky. You never know what those Google guys are going to do, so I don't want that one to be ever promoted using LANrev Promoter. And I'm going to go back to my GitHub here for a second. So using a simple sudo defaults command, whoops. Come on. We can just copy this right here and paste it in our terminal. So what that's saying is there's an array called do not promote. We're going to add the string Google Chrome to it. And therefore, Google Chrome should never be promoted via LANrev Promoter. So if I go back and I run LANrev Promoter again, we can see now, hey, it already knows our group, so we don't have to enter that again. And now it sees these 2 packages that need to be promoted and this one that will not be promoted. So if I go and hit yes, promotes 2 packages. We come here. Got to work with Rob on figuring out why I have to reload the tables. We see that Google Chrome is not promoted, but if I go to Acronis Access, that's in production. If I go to OSQuery, that's in production. And if I run this again, one more time, now it says nothing needs to be promoted. Google Chrome is still in the, hey, we're not going to do that, and there are no packages. So the idea behind this is using something like LaunchD to have it run once a week or something like that. It's definitely in beta. It's definitely kind of dangerous for a few reasons. It's making straight SQL writes to the server database, so I'd love to not have it do that, but couldn't figure it out just yet. I went to the debugging class. Maybe I'll learn. So this is something that hopefully could develop into a kind of a cool product, but really just another way to alleviate yourself of kind of a simple task that is easy to forget, especially for me. Maybe it's just me. Tom forgets too. Maintaining agent health. This is one, David already mentioned that, right, the Achilles heel of an agent-based system is, in fact, the agent. Both if the agent breaks on its own, if a customer goes rogue and removes the agent, it's like, how do we get back into this system? So this is something we started pondering, and we looked into a few different platforms. We looked at Puppet, we looked at Chef. Those are great tools. I know a lot of the big guys use those, but we were like, we don't really need a whole new product, a whole new infrastructure to support just to do this. We thought we could probably do this a little bit simpler. So we wrote this tool, or this Python script again, called LANrev health check. That's also on the GitHub. And all it really does is a few key things. It looks to make sure the agent is on the system. It makes sure that the agent can talk to the server. It makes sure that certain settings are set properly, like ports you want it to communicate over, the server address you want it to talk to, and then one or two other things. But that was all good. We got that working, and we were like, hey, that's great. It can handle certain things like changing those settings already. But what if it actually needs to reinstall the agent? So what if it detects the agent isn't on there? How do we get it back? And the friendly folks at Google built this tool called Plan B. It's a very simple tool, written in Objective-C, and all it really does is pull a disk image from a web server and install the package within it. It gets, it can do some other, SSL validation and stuff, but all I cared about was install a package from a web server. And that provided the perfect tool. So what we can do is within our script, we can just call this binary if we ever need to. So let's go ahead and watch. So this is our client machine. I'm going to flip back and forth between admin and customer here, but I'm a rogue customer with admin rights. But as a, come on. So all I was going to show here is that we place the files on our systems under user local sbin. So you'll see LANrev health check and Plan B. This is the script. This is the actual binary. And it outputs when it runs to a log. You can obviously customize this. Mine for this demo just says jbaker's GitHub, basically. All right, so I'm the rogue customer, and I have root admin rights, whatever, and I say, I don't like LANrev. I Googled how to remove it, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. I don't want IT ever touching my system. So at this point, you really have lost access to this machine, right? LANrev can't talk to it anymore. But every night, basically, LANrev health check will run. And the first thing it does is it checks to make sure that the binary is in place. And it says, wait a minute, the whole folder got removed. So then it calls Plan B. And it does the little server validation. And it's saving this reinstall DMG. The unstable is because Google lets you choose tracks. If you have like a test group, you can do an unstable versus stable. Reinstalls the LANrev agent. Good to go. And if we go back into library application support, hey, there it is. We can see all the contents. The agent is now back into the system. And actually what we did, well, hold on, I'll tell you in a second. So this is just to show you if you ran it again, begins the health check, sees that the primary components are in place. Now it checks a few other things, make sure that the agent is up to date, can check Apple software updates, etc. The defined defaults value is a defaults plist that you can host on the same web server. We looked at this as a way to give it a known good source of information. So you have your defaults plist with LANrev. We put that on the web server with all of our good values, our good server, our good ports and everything, and it will actually pull that every time assuming it can talk to the internet and compare those and say, oh, something got changed on my system, let me reset back to that. So that's another just kind of safety step. I was going to mention something, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, I was going to say we built a reinstaller that leaves the preferences intact for LANrev. So if they were really sneaky and they went and removed that, then you're kind of stuck. But we didn't want to delete those when we reinstalled the agent because that kept some of the install logs and some of the agent name information. Yeah?
You get a notification that it had to reinstall the software?
Yep. So at the end, if it runs Plan B, I get this email. And it says, here's the host name, here's the date, and here's why it had to run. So if it runs because it couldn't find the binary, if it runs because one of the checks didn't work, something like that, it will actually include that. And one of the reasons I did this is I like emails. And two, I just want to feel popular, right? Two is that this allows you to look for trends. If you're seeing the same host name show up over and over and over again for the same reason, it might be worth investigating, right? HR might want to check into that. All right, so that's agent health. Asset insight. Asset insight is, I think, something that IT, especially, I can definitely attest to this, often wants to push off. Because I think it's easy for us to say, well, we're technology guys. I don't care where the property's at. It just has to have the right software installed. And that's not really the case. If a customer loses their laptop, they're not going to your property team. Your managers aren't anyway. And they're not going to say, hey, was this encrypted? They're coming to you. They want to make sure you know, was this machine encrypted? What data was on this machine? Who had it last? Where did it check in from last? So asset insight is something that we all have to kind of own, and I think a lot of IT people are like, hopefully I never have to touch property, I just want to deal with technology. And LANrev gives us a really cool tool built in, this ODBC export. So how many of you guys use that? Does anybody use that tool? Okay, a few hands, cool. I don't know if anybody else uses LANrev, but so a few of you are using this, and that's great, but I really urge all of you to use it because what it does is it exports the entire LANrev server database. All of the information about heartbeat, agents, usernames, et cetera, all the 700 or so smart fields that LANrev has will be in this export. And that will then allow you to query against it for information. So we have a lot of security officers and managers who need certain insight into information about our assets. This would allow you to, rather than having to create an information item in a smart group and then export that, email it to them, you could like give this over to a DBA and say, hey, can you just set up a dashboard of this and then give that to the manager, and then they can just make their own queries or do whatever they need. This is a really useful tool that we actually took pretty big advantage of in our environment. We expanded upon it just a little bit. We recently had a project where we have a separate database of our purchased property. We know what's been bought, and in the government, we care about where our property is going because that's really your money, and they want to make sure it's not running away. So we have a property database, and then we leveraged the ODBC export, and we built this combined database. So then we wrote this script, macreporter.py, to query against the combined database. And what it can do is we wrote all the queries, so I mean you could obviously expand upon it, and this script is on the GitHub. But it uses the combined Oracle database. It could easily be tailored for the ODBC export just to use that. But it generates reports for our admins. It sends customers notifications if their computer is missing or if their computer hasn't checked in. It can basically just automate all of this for us again so that I don't have to go email the customer, ISSOs don't have to go email the customer, HR doesn't. Everything runs on a nightly basis basically, and it says, hey, what's my list of computers that haven't checked in recently? Let me push out emails to all the customers that are accountable for those machines. We're not going to actually demo this, but just show you an example. This is what a customer would see if their machine hasn't checked in for 90 days. So that's our limit in our environment. The machine has to be on the network every 90 days, or they get this pretty email. And it's just an email kind of saying, put your computer on the network. Because we have a property database, yours probably wouldn't include all this, but we've got some other extra information, serial number, username, or accountable user, excuse me. This asset identifiers are decals. And that basically just helps them go, hey, I have 3 computers. Oh, they need this one specifically because they provided me the serial number or something. A lot of that information, though, you could get from the export, serial number, most recent user, all that kind of stuff, and you could include that in the email. This is a report we generate for our admins, so like myself, but as also our managers and security officers. So we have our combined database, and we know what's been purchased versus what's actually in LANrev. And we can output this big list and say, hey, we're still missing 35 computers that we know we bought. Where are they? And again, we'll actually have accountable users for all of these, so we'll know who technically they were bought for, and those are going to be the first people we're going to kind of go yell at. So it's really just to drive the point home. The Mac Reporter script is cool. It's great. If you want to use it, feel free. I would love that. But definitely look into the ODBC export. I think it's a really good tool that's kind of hidden away in LANrev's features. It's not one of the ones that's really advertised a lot. Deep monitoring. So this whole talk is about how we've automated ourselves out of the job, right? And that's really never true. If you were in the security talk yesterday by Dan Griggs, he even says, don't automate yourself out of the security. You need to constantly be doing stuff, right? But what we the point is, we've now been able to move on to these kind of things. How can we get a little bit deeper into monitoring our clients? We don't want to have to put out fires every day. This time we can actually go look at this bigger picture of how can we dive deeper into our 750 machines, which I know for us is big, but for some of you is like, I have 5,000. So these are definitely tools you'd want to look into. OSQuery, it's a tool built by folks at Facebook. It's a kind of a SQL query-like tool that allows you to query on tables that are pre-built. It works on Mac. It was built for Mac, and now I think it's ported to Linux and Windows maybe already. So this is a really cool tool. It gets really granular in what kind of information you can garner. Santa, built by the folks at Google. It's a whitelist, blacklist binary tool, so it knows to either block certain binaries or allow certain binaries. It looks for SHA signatures, I can't think of the right word, but to see if it's made by Apple, and then it will always allow it, that kind of thing. Central and Doorman are both front ends for these two things, or rather Doorman is just for OSQuery. Central is a front end for OSQuery and Santa. So if you want to look into either of these tools, I definitely recommend looking into Central and Doorman because they don't really have front ends. So these just make it a little bit easier to navigate and use. But this is a LANrev talk, sort of. So we wanted to see how could we use LANrev and OSQuery. So we used OSQuery's deeper monitoring, quote unquote, to allow us to do a few things. LANrev, again, has all these great reporting tools built in and all this different information it can garner, but it can't get everything. So what we're going to do here and show you in a second is using LANrev custom information item, we can actually run OSQuery commands on clients and get that query result back into LANrev. Then we can use a smart group that utilizes the custom information items results. And for this example, we're using a profile to assign to that smart group and show you how you could then take action on that client computer. So here we've got our LANrev server, and our client machine. And in this scenario, our client is like, I'm going to be safe, and I'm going to download LastPass. We don't like LastPass for some reason. So we've got our custom information item, and this is a little hard to read, I apologize. It's basically running an OSQuery command looking for Chrome extensions and specifically the LastPass free password manager. LANrev gives you a lot of installed software, but it actually can't do browser extensions. That was the smart group basically saying if the OSQuery query returns something, show up in that group. And then we've got this really mean profile that basically locks down the system to a fairly unusable state. It's going to block all their system preference panes so that they can't do anything really, at least with the preferences. It's going to set a banner to say contact IT now or contact it now, if that's how you want to read it. And it's going to point them to a fake proxy that says nowhere.com. So all their web traffic is basically going to stop working because they're being routed to a non-existent proxy. So we're on our client machine. We're going to open up Chrome. And again, we're the customer who's like, I'm going to be safe. I'm going to generate a new password for every website. Unknowingly, IT hates it. I wanted to add music here, but couldn't tell if that'd be professional or not. Yeah, I was like, dun, 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 dun. Okay, so this is showing that, hey, I still have access to the system. This is actually one part where LANrev kind of lacks using OSQuery. Certain things like Central and Casper have APIs, so this is actually a little bit faster, but it will still work. We're going to expedite this process a little bit. We're going to basically force the client to run a full inventory, which would force that custom information item to run. This is all stuff that would happen on the heartbeat basis of your agents, so you wouldn't have to do this in order to utilize OSQuery. It's, again, just for demo purposes. Then we synchronize to the server, and all of a sudden we have that client. So now it shows up in that restricted plugins smart group because the query returned saying, hey, there's actually LastPass on this machine. So now our client machine, again, we'll just assume another heartbeat is run and it does its software distribution check, which is what's happening here. If you don't know some of these flags, they can be very helpful. So it runs an SD check, and we go back and we look at the profile installation status, and all of a sudden, the lockdown profile just got installed, and all the other ones just got uninstalled. So now we're back on the client. He's messing around or she's messing around. Uh-oh, we're locked out of basically all of our preference panes. Can't change anything, can't touch anything. So we're like, maybe I'll Google it and see if I can fix it. Uh-oh, that didn't work. But we know that PSU mech-mins are really smart, so we're going to Google that. Dang it. And maybe just last resort. Nope, didn't work. So we're like, okay, let's log out here. We contemplate restarting, but we're not gonna. Maybe that'll fix it. Uh-oh, contact IT now. So we see at this point something is not right. And we're not gonna go any further than that. But at this point, you've seen how OSQuery could work in a LANrev environment. Takes a little bit of kind of hacking around. But it's a really, really good tool that a lot of sessions have already talked about. I would really encourage you to check it out. But we wanted to emphasize that you could use this with LANrev. I think LANrev gets left out of a lot of things and not always given the most kind of just admirable looks. It's a lot about an animal-based product here. So this is just showing, hey, there are open source tools that we can kind of use with LANrev. So how could we expand? This is partly how could LANrev expand in our opinion. Some things that we would love to see are better monitoring and reporting built in. We've gone over how we built all these scripts that send us emails. This is something that I would love for LANrev just to build into the product. I think it's what a lot of other products have. And so definitely going forward, I'd like to see that implemented. Better APIs. So we obviously do some kind of hacky things with LANrev Promoter. Maybe we can figure out a way to do that with APIs and not actually write directly to the server. And then automatic SD group assignment. This is another thing that's really small in a lot of people's eyes. It's like, well, that's a tick box. But it's another step out of your day that you have to remember, and you have to remote into the server or whatever your admin and do. And it's just another thing that it's like, this is pretty easy to implement, or I would think it's pretty easy. I can't say that. But this would just be another quick alleviation. And if you do use auto package and auto packager and that kind of stuff, it's just an extra thing that you're like, hey, I see all this software got installed or downloaded, and I already know it's out to test. So it's just another quick kind of speed up your life. All right, well, thank you very much. I'm going to hand it back over to David.
So I was jealous of Jeremy's avatar and asked my daughter to make me one, and that's what she came up with. And that links to my bagpipe stuff just because bagpipes. I don't know.
You might have heard it last night.
You may have. So we've given you some ideas now where automation has taken place for us and can be deployed perhaps for you. Just to kind of remind you that what we've managed to do, 1 button, 3 fields, and a computer is completely provisioned and enrolled. File Vault is automatically enabled with all of our admin accounts. Third-party software is now as automated as we can make it for updating. And if you help him write the promoter software, we could even take that a step further where we don't have to look at LANrev at all, and it will just start doing this stuff. Assets are tracked. We don't have to get involved running queries figuring out where all the emails are for the end users who are abusing the systems and taking these things offline. These are things that are done now automatically with notifications. What did we do? Why did we do all this? We just automated ourselves out of our responsibilities as IT admins. Why would you want to do this? Well, actually, and this is the soft side now, because I like soft side stuff and bigger picture stuff. That's where my strength is. To give you an opportunity to have the space and time enough to think about things that are coming down the pike and will be impacting your end users and help improve your infrastructure as a result. And there are a number of important issues that I think you should begin thinking about if you haven't already. I mean, most of you, I think, are in higher education, so some of the ideas I'll share here may be irrelevant, or you may have already thought about them. But these are issues that are really important to our clients. And since we've created these automated tools, Jeremy and I actually spend our days planning and thinking strategically to roll out the next set of utilities and systems architecture designs and implementations for our managers who themselves don't have time to think about this stuff and are relying upon us to do so. So here are some of the things that we're seeing in our environment. Data bloom. Where do we find the room? Right? We've adopted a model of data retention that causes our end users to expect their data to remain available forever until they decide what to do with it. And you know, the digitization of data is a qualitative transformation, and that's interesting. We can talk about that later, but it's primarily a quantitative transformation. You just think about it. Prior to 1985, all human records, the entirety of human history, could be stored on a few terabytes. Today, we generate roughly 27 to 30 petabytes of data a day. What are we going to do with that? We can't just keep throwing hardware to store all that stuff. So are you ready for that data bloom? Because it's happening on our end. Data ubiquity. Data do not like to be locked into a single system. Data want to be accessed from everywhere at any time. Do you have the infrastructure set up to do this securely? I mean, mobile computing has transformed our environments in ways that personal computing did to mainframe administrators and administrations. It's clear that our end users want to be able to get their work done on their devices at any time and anywhere. Are you ready for that? We have a really tough time in our environment preparing for that sort of thing. Okay, data bloom, data ubiquity, what's the answer? Cloud, sure it is. We all know this, go to the cloud. Do you even know what the cloud is? Can anyone define what the cloud is for me? No, John, you're not allowed to. Is it, for instance, platform or software or infrastructure as a service? But more importantly, do we really want to rent a rack or a VM from a vendor? To whom is the vendor accountable? To us or shareholders? Right? Have you read terms and conditions of those vendors? We're shoveling a whole lot of data up there. Do we know what they are and are not doing with those data? Someone in your job is going to ask, and you're going to have to come up with some good answers for them. Data exfiltration. Yeah, data likes to leak. Everybody wants access to it, so data likes to leak. There are Hester's 2 fundamental laws of digital data. They replicate and they scatter. If they replicate, that means data is eternal. If they scatter, that means the entire boundary paradigm of data security is silly and naive. Data will always escape. We need to rethink the paradigm of how we manage our data from trying to squirrel it away and keeping it from running away to maybe monitoring to where it is going and determining whether that's the right direction for it to be going. What is that going to mean for your infrastructure? And then finally, the Internet of Things. Industry isn't interested in data security. It, in fact, relies on the ease of access to data. Google in particular, for example, scoops up 27 petabytes a day. They alone scoop up that much and sell it to brokers and advertisers. This means that the protocols and architectures on which things rely are by design insecure and can provide, therefore, a means for nefarious actors to get into your environment. Or do even worse. Think of ransomware. Ransomware is interesting. It's already hit us and some of our end clients. It's a good thing we've done backups because they would have lost years of research. But what about internet-connected medical devices? What if the next ransomware event is, I have your pacemaker? That's real. And the Internet of Things is going to allow that to happen. And there's no capital or regulatory incentive to change this. So are you ready to support thousands of wide open doors into your infrastructure? We've had the time to think about some of this stuff. We're not really good at at our solutions for it. But automation has given us the time now to be able to talk with our security officers, to talk with our managers, to get them thinking differently, to get them preparing for this stuff. So for us, automation may have eliminated some of our responsibilities, but has grown us opportunities for additional responsibilities. So here's where the next phase is, the question of what career options, in fact, automation could represent for you. And here are just a few. Management. You lose tech skills, but you gain the opportunity to shape a team and make an impact. Technical design. If you're really good at something, you are a high-value asset. SMEs tends to be a label of approbation. No, you're an expert. You can bring your expertise to a client and help them understand things that they don't even know they don't understand. That's not a bad career path. Of course, security, our infrastructure of trust, is abused 24/7 by governmental and criminal organizations. Automated. Little lone hackers aren't the deal anymore. Criminal organizations running all the time. Security needs some very thoughtful people rethinking the way that we've developed our infrastructure. Sales. We like our devices, we're good at doing certain things. Why not go into sales? Help other people feel that love. Clearly, since you've been doing all this coding, go into development. I've lost one person. I'm about to lose another person. They get really good at this stuff, and it's great to watch them think about new career options as a result of the ability to think and not react. And finally, analytics. But by that, I just mean turning data into information, not necessarily being a mathematician and writing algorithms. But in our case, the data bloom, for example, I have nobody at any of my client sites who can tell me how much data, where are the data, how much storage, what do I need in the future, how old are the data, when were they last accessed. No insight into that at all. One data analytics guy, storage analytics guy, would save millions of dollars for my clients. That's just one clue about how to turn data into information, so ponder that. In any case, these are some thoughts I wanted to leave, just because, as I said, automation allows us to not react and to proact. And maybe now, if you hop on the automation bandwagon, we'll see you in a completely different career path. Here's our stuff. If you like what my daughter drew, just contact me. And we're here to answer questions. And any feedback you want to offer, you know where to go. Thank you.
Thanks. We've got 17 minutes if anybody does have questions. Yep, John. Hold on, wait for the microphone.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was wondering if is it
Yeah, I can hear you.
okay? Gotcha. Okay. Does LANrev importer let you programmatically define installation conditions?
To an extent.
Okay.
So we've built on that a little bit. So you can set install. So one of the recent additions was defining the actual hour that it can be available. So we now set all of our packages to 8 p.m. On the same day or the next day, whatever. You can add seconds upon import. So I didn't feel like that was accurate enough, so I did the hour. You can set what software needs to be on the system in order for that software to get installed. So like for Skype, we make sure Skype is one of the installed software conditions for all of our Skype updates. So yeah, to an extent, not everything that you can do in the GUI has yet been added, but it's all technically feasible.
Okay, so that might be something that if I were to look into, like clone the code, see if I can add it, and then do a pull request. It's just something you haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah. Patrick Gallagher, if you are familiar with him, he's Pat GMAC on the Slack channel. He's been really helpful as well. So Tom Bergen built Absolute Manage Export originally, so a lot of the hard work is his, and then he left, so I took it. And then Pat GMAC has also built a few of those features. So he added minimum OS and stuff. He actually added some stuff for Windows, since auto package recipes are showing up for Windows. So yeah, it's definitely growing, but there's a big, huge list of all the features that you can do in LANrev that could be added. It's a matter of what you find useful. Anybody else?
Let me ask you, I'll let you out early, I promise, but let me ask you, what are some of the things you see impacting your clients coming down the pipe? Nothing.
Malware and adware, really huge problem. And only growing.
It is.
Yeah.
The ransomware is more frightening to me.
So his answer was malware and adware, if you didn't hear him. And I think that's where those deeper monitoring tools really come in handy. And I think they're really geared at trying to be preventative rather than reactive, right? These are kind of the up-and-coming products. All AVs are essentially reactive to a large extent. They know signatures and they know what to look for. These are products that are basically trying to get ahead of the curve. So OSQuery's got a lot of pre-built queries. It can get a little intimidating. Again, they actually mentioned this in the security talk. It can get a little intimidating to look at OSQuery, but there's a lot of pre-built ones, and some of them are geared, at malware. Again, Santa is very much geared at basically just trying to block anything that it doesn't recognize, that kind of stuff. So there are tools that are coming out, but it's something we're facing, especially ransomware, like he said, is we've been fortunate enough that our Macs haven't really gotten hit, but what do we do if they do? We don't really have a way right now. So.
Yeah, I'm aware of like 5 or 6 incidents at 1 or 2 of my client sites already. And that has necessitated a response on a reactive response on our part to do endpoint backups. And that's something that, once again, it's like, where are we going to get the server, where are we going to get the racks to store all that stuff? Because that's costly. And, well, let's just put it in the cloud. And I have one friend of mine I know whose legal department actually reads the terms and conditions before doing that, because when they do, they come back and say, you will not move into this cloud because we've just surrendered IP. You just surrendered IP by agreeing to this. So they spend 6 months renegotiating with the providers. But you didn't know that kind of stuff was hidden, and it's there.
It's distributed around the world.
Well, yeah, and anywhere. And in a federal environment, we have to know where. So we have like FedRAMP, but nobody's quite clear what FedRAMP certification means. It may mean that the vendors are required not to steal IP or to use the data for their own analytics purposes, or to sell that information out to others for analytics purposes. It may mean that, but I don't know.
Is there a question in the back? Do you have a question?
I was just curious, the clients that you were mentioning.
I'll repeat it, John. I'll just repeat it.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'll just repeat it after you. Go ahead.
Okay. Do you know how your clients are getting attacked with ransomware?
Yeah, really incredible spear phishing.
So his question was, David,
Sorry.
how are we being hit by ransomware and that kind of stuff? And the
Yeah.
answer was spear phishing.
Spear phishing, because in the federal space, the kinds of information that were described in one session about things you don't want to give away, in like the like soft, what would you call it, soft surveillance, before you, right, the passive surveillance stuff, all that's out there. By law, you can look up people's salaries. You can look up their locations, their phone. All of that stuff is out there by law. So the spear phishing is really quite remarkable. And you know what? They're not stupid, the end users. There are many end users that might be kind of naive, but the spear phishing is what's just, we go through these attacks that are staged attacks, and I tell my ISSO during these fake, what do we call them?
Just they do like the fish me kind of stuff where they
Yeah,
send them
and
out.
it's an
but
internal
actually
fish me
from
thing. I
IT.
click on them all just to upset the ISSO. What will happen when? But they brand it internally. They and names, and it takes you opening up a header to see where these things are coming from. So that's what's going on. And this isn't like cute little hackers in a basement doing shit. This is, again, criminal or governmental organizations who have taken this to a level that's just frightening.
It's a user problem, not a technology problem. So your clients themselves are fine.
He said it's a user problem, not IT problem, in a sense.
Well, yes, but insofar as IT hasn't figured out what a better way of handling it might be. Like we're looking at products like Block and or even what's the other, ransomware, or
yeah,
some
Patrick
of these
Wardle,
little.
he's mentioned yesterday in the security talk, and as well in the debugging.
Maybe there are processes that behave in a certain way that we could be observing, and when we see them pop up, go, what the hell is that? And I mean, there's some things we could do that. We need to be more clever than the criminals or the spies. And we don't have time to do that while we're, updating Java. So.
Anybody else? Got another 10 minutes. Yep, hold on, wait for maybe you're in tossable range.
Yeah, everybody watch out for the computers here.
Thank you.
I think one of the challenges I'm having with some of my clients are dealing with new hires that may be either fresh out of school or otherwise, and they're very interested in technology, and sometimes they really think of work as the place where they go to use old technology. They are very interested in having the latest thing, and the general mindset of IT is here to get in my way, and how can I get my job done, and if I have to find an end run around these things, how do I deal with that? And that's becoming a more common approach, that anybody who's already been at the company for more than a few years isn't working in their best interest.
Yeah, that's a really, I'm just going to keep bringing up Dan Griggs. I really enjoyed his talk, which is why. He gave a really interesting talk, and he also works for the federal government around where we do. And so I'd have two thoughts on that. One, we work in a very similar environment where, because it's government, there are just certain requirements that we don't get to really say yes or no to, and we think this would be better. It's like, you need to just do it. But we also work with incredibly intelligent doctors and scientists and people who've using Mac for longer than I've been alive and are like, I can get right around that. And I think his talk, if you didn't see it, if it's recorded, certainly watch it. That's hard for us. I think it's a daily discussion almost of, are we limiting them so that their job and research can't even be done for the sake of security, which in a lot of cases is a checkbox that really doesn't do very much, and can we expand upon that? So one example of what we have tried to do in our environment is admin users. We have a rule, can't be an admin user, and if you are, you get a secondary account specifically built for that. So what we did is we put everybody into what we called the power users group, and that basically edited the authorization database to give them rights to a lot of the stupid stuff, adding a printer, changing a network setting. But the biggest thing it didn't give them is installation of software, because that's one of the bigger vulnerabilities. And I know Dan Griggs actually says he does allow that, which was kind of surprising. But so it's really, I don't have a great answer for you, but it's definitely a struggle we've seen, and we're trying to be as creative as possible, like the power users thing. And I think for a lot of users, it's actually been helpful. And then there are the people who are like, I need WebEx. And it's like, dang it. But also using LANrev for that kind of stuff, we do a lot of self-service, right? So all the WebEx stuff is in the on-demand software. Yeah, I don't have a good answer. I really liked what Dan said, though, of he wants the customers to feel like this is almost their machine. And I thought he brought up a really good psychological aspect of it because they treat it better. I thought that was really interesting. They take care of the machine physically. So it's a struggle that we discuss all the time about how do we not impede research that's helping the entire world and yet still be secure. But
Yeah, I've said this probably even here, where our jobs ends with this equipment. We focus intensely on this. We forget the fact that for everybody else, a computer is a tool to get another job done. And the more we hinder this toolbox, the more likely they are to find other tools, circumvent what we're trying to prevent them from doing, because they just want to work. And in the like medical research field and stuff like that, we would be hindering science. And I know there's another client who's very clever end users are doctors in clinical settings, and any time a security push wants to get pushed out, all the doctors and nurses have to say is they call up and say, "You will kill a patient if you do that." Done. So they've figured out how to prevent stupid security policies from impeding them. Now, are they vulnerable? Probably. But in the end, it reminds IT what they're there for.
His point about new employees, especially younger ones, I work with a lot of architects over the years, and the people come out of school, they want to do, they want to do everything instantly, and to be honest, it's almost they have to grow up, because you're now, unless you're in a 2-person firm or a 3-person firm, if you're in a 20-person firm, you've got to work with a team. You go off and do these interesting things on your own and bring it in, nobody else can touch it. You haven't helped anybody. You made yourself look good for 10 minutes. The next day you have to get talked to by the owner because you wasted everybody's time. And it's literally a matter of growing up. And the school and educational systems aren't addressing that. In a lot of these jobs people are going into, you need to be a team player, not a solo star. And it's a, as you get back to it, it's a people issue, not a technology issue.
Although I think technology, as I said, I think technology, we need to rethink our paradigm. We need to rethink what it means to be secure and rethink our approaches to this stuff. And we're not. Hopefully there are some very intelligent people doing that.
all the way in the back.
Go deep.
I don't know. Here, we'll do the rugby thing.
So I too also work in the medical field, researchers, and the one thing that's been helping us is telling the doctors and the researchers, hey, you do your science, we're here to help you with these tools. You call them tools, that's what you use too, but we'll focus on the computers, we'll focus on the security. That way you can just do the science. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about ransomware, we're taking care of it. You know, I mean, this is clearly obvious, but sometimes having that language is helpful when you're talking to these people. And knowing like, okay, Dr. Smith, I promise you, we got your back. Just go do your thing, right? And then that usually takes off that that resentment and that defensive mechanism that they tend to have. No, don't touch my box. It's like, oh, okay, no problem, but we're here to help.
And it is, and to go back to the theme of this, a lot of what we are able to do to our clients is demonstrate our value and to that project by the fact that this work is just getting done, and we've dropped a whole lot of end user interaction and interference by the automation mechanisms that we've deployed here. We've annoyed them in certain respects, though, by sending out emails saying, get the thing on the line. Where is this? This is lost. And they go, and we send we send the police officers after them. It's lost or stolen, and stuff like that. And but everything else now has improved for them, where they feel confident in our ability to help them. But it takes a Herculean effort to get to that stage of really thinking about what our end users need and automating to the point where human volition gets taken out of the equation.
Anybody else? We got about 2 more minutes. Anybody questions on LANrev, our setup, or more about this automation, anything like that?
Well, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks very much, guys.